Good evening, good afternoon, everybody. This is Michael Williams and my cohort sitting to my left, Daniel Thomas Rouse. And I hope you're enjoying this conference. This has been a lot of fun. These are a lot of the things that we're sharing with you are things that I have just shot off at the mouth about over the years of things that I've learned here and there. But in this session and in this conference, we're trying to compile all that, and also plus some things that we had learned since and things we learned while we were actually putting the conference together. And that is the issue of creation and the process of creation. I love the word process, and the understanding that the gospel revolution carries deep within us is the process of creation. That when God created Adam and Eve, he started a process. He didn't finish a process in the garden. He started a process. One of the things that helped realign to where that all of this could fall into place for me was, again, Don Bartlett and him sharing with me. I never will forget him saying over and over and over again, there was no plan B. There was just plan A. And it was like, what's he even talking about, So it took me a while. I've shared that story with you guys, even flying Don down to have us to have a discussion of this, because I knew that Don was a very well learned man and he really wanted to know the truth. So I was sure that I could change his mind. And at the end of our time down there, 4 days together, I thought I did change his mind. But then I was reading, and the Romans chapter 8 really flipped my world over. And I realized that this concept that what we call the fall of man in the book of Genesis had to be a part of the plan of God. And that was, Daniel, you remember when that happened, when we started doing that? Yeah. How did that affect you? Because were you of the mindset that I was, that the fall was like, oh my goodness, what has happened,
Yeah, and definitely that was something that I was taught in the Word of Faith movement too, was that if man would have just been okay, they would have stayed there and lived in the garden forever.
Yeah.
So, yeah, of course, when Michael comes around and do what Michael does, he rocked my world, man, and took everything and changed it. And but it holds to the story. It holds to the storyline, and the storyline fits that understanding that Paul brought us in Romans.
It did, and it was Paul that brought us that. It took Don Bartlett to bring it to me, and then with whatever I do, with whatever I know, then I've been able trying to communicate that to others. And it seems to have been successful. I don't know of any of the GRs that we lost or people said, that's just going someplace I can't go. If they did, I'm unaware of it, because all of the people that I understand that are with us, we've lost others because of other reasons. And it's not necessarily things that we changed. But I'll tell you who the people that have not been able to continue on with the GR. I'll tell you exactly what it is. And I think Daniel will be able to confirm this also. And that's those who had this extreme direction in them and persuasion of a personal relationship with Jesus, and Jesus just doing everything for them. And the more that we sought the gospel and to understand the gospel, the less we saw a personal relationship as being the focus of the understanding of the gospel. In fact, the personal relationship seemed to detract from the big picture of Jesus being the Redeemer of the world. And so what we did is we started allowing that to step to the forefront we stopped any discussion, and for myself, and I know this happened to you also, Daniel, we stopped any of the practices of a personal relationship with God or Christ and begin to realize that these interreactions that we have with each other is what the emphasis of all of this was all about for the power of the cross. So we were able to go through all of these transitions. And for those of you that have hung in there, thank you for being with us. Thank you for supporting this effort. We have only one interest, and that is to try to get to the bottom of this. We've had to wade through thousands of years of misinformation, disinformation, manipulation, control, and all kinds of things. And Daniel and I both have admitted our participation in some of those things unwittingly, but knowing all the inside all the time that we were participating in something that just didn't feel good. It was really strange to go through that and to begin to just have these questions swirling around inside. And so the transition of that to where that we begin to see the plan of God. And then, of course, from that point, I was able to see that the plan actually was all laid out before the foundation of the world, before God said, let there be light, is the way I communicate it, because that's the way that really settles in me the strongest as to what period of time this was that God made this plan. Was before he said, let there be light. This was already settled. It was already settled that Adam and Eve would not only be created, but that they would partake of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. I have to shake my head just because that was such a transition for me to embrace that concept that this was not the fall. Don challenged me and told me, he said, isn't it amazing that the fall of man is not mentioned anywhere in the Bible? Well, we had already been teaching on that making Jesus your personal Lord and Savior was nowhere in the Bible. So, so much can be learned just by acknowledging what's not there.
Yeah.
And that's where people begin to say that what the things that we do are unteaching, that we unteach things. And you do have to unteach something. If you taught something and you're wrong, you have to unteach it. And so what that did for all of us is give us a scope, a broader view, if you will. Truth is truth, but it always has to have a catalyst to carry that. Language experts talk about these things, and they're really beautiful as to what they are. That's my neighbor's loud car. The catalyst has to be there for it to be able to be transferred. And so many things, honestly, if you think about it, truth has to have an arc, if you will. Moses is another, there's another perfect type and shadow. We've told you about the ark and all of the things. We're going to go into a little bit more about the ark. But do you know that the basket that was Moses was put in also had pitch on it, the very same thing that the ark had on it, the brush and things that was Moses' mother made for Moses to be this baby floating in the wood was covered with the very same stuff that the ark was covered with. This just goes on. It's so intricate and so detailed that you just cannot ignore the story. So seeing that the story was so detailed by foreknowledge of God and then predestination of God, then to think that there was a oops moment and then had to come up with, now what are we going to do? Well, let's do plan B since plan A didn't work. And once that was concluded, an acceleration of learning started taking place in the gospel revolution. That's true with any person, anywhere, on any subject. When you are accurately locating yourself and where you are in the situation, that's when you begin to learn. When you have a misconception of who you are and where you are, you can't learn what is there to be learned. So in the gospel revolution, what our whole goal is to help you and ourselves to understand who we are, who you are, and where you are in the big picture of this. And man, once that happens, you begin to be able, number one, to deal with you. You are the number one person you have trouble dealing with. It's not me. But now it might be Daniel, but we can take care of that later. But really, we are the number one person that we have a hard time dealing with until the gospel comes in. And then you can fairly and reasonably negotiate with yourself. But, being honest with yourself is the biggest gulp of honesty you will ever take. It is just, some people thrive by lying to themselves. In fact, I will tell you that I think by my own experience that most people on the planet thrive by lying to themselves about themselves rather than being truthful with themselves about themselves. And confirmation bias about yourself is so plentiful that you can believe a lie about yourself just so very easily. So, but in the face of the fact that we saw these details, these unbelievable, magnificent details, it has made it easier for us to look at the big picture and see that these things were done. Also, the other part of that story about being able to see and understand and know that everything that happened was predestined, including what happened in the garden, and who was going to be king and who said what, who prophesied what, when, where, and how, is just as important in knowing that that was all planned out. The end of all of that was also planned out. Now, in our next session coming up this evening, Daniel is going to take you into that time warp, if you will, that time frame in which all of this took place. So we were able to come to the conclusion that the revelation and all of that leads us to understand about the end of time. And how can you, living in where the sun comes up and goes down and the planet is circling around the moon in its path, around the sun. We just created a whole new universe, didn't we? And have a concept that there is now no such thing as time. But you see, that has to be read in the concept and in the context of time in relationship to God and the finished work of the cross. You see, the finished work of the cross was planned before let there be light. Mm-hmm. And once that concept settles inside of you, then suddenly the willingness and the ability to see the structure of all of this, it's like watching a building being built. And part of it you can almost predetermine in your own mind what's going to happen next. And sure enough, you look and say, wow, there it is. And it's just like we were studying some things about the ark, and we'll go into with you. And as Ethan was looking at them, and we found out that there was a certain type of element that God told him to paint the whole ark with. And and it was called a dye, and I just knew that it was going to be red. So I had, in fact, Daniel and I looked it up here just a little bit earlier, and voila, there it is. This dye was red. So we had the Ark of the Covenant, the Ark that was the art of Moses, and then of course the types and shadows with that, with the blood of Christ being the ark. And it's just, and again, the intricacies of all of this and the timeline and the fact that it's laid out in a family tree. It's what family tree? The human family tree, starting with Adam all the way down to Christ. But as I was saying, it's also just as important to know that all of this was predestined, all of this was planned out. It is even more important now that you know that nothing is predestined, nothing is planned out. The only thing that was planned out was your freedom. You were never set free by Jesus in your earth existence from the time you were conceived until the rest of your life. You will never experience what it's like to be set free by Jesus. You can only learn that the human race was set free 2,000 years ago. Now, equal impact, I would say probably so, because all of this has to do now with what you know and what you don't know. The gospel has nothing to do with what you have and what you don't have. The gospel simply tells you what you already have and what you already do not have. The gospel is not about things you can gain and things you can get rid of. This gospel is not about that at all. This gospel is about what exists now in its entirety. And there is no struggle to do that. There's no struggle to not be this and to be more of that. Now, you may have that struggle with yourself, with, maybe even addictions or whatever, but it has nothing to do with the gospel. It has nothing to do with the truth about you or the truth about me or Daniel or anybody else on the face of this earth, because this gospel has been extremely well put together and planned out. And so what we are doing in going back and showing you these three phases, or three scenes, if you will, as we've been relying on, these three scenes of creation, and that is Adam and Eve. And of course, we want to reassure everybody again that God created Adam and Eve in his image. He did not create, as 1 Corinthians chapter 11 tries to assert, is that God created Adam and then he put Eve under Adam's authority and under Adam's, that she was in the image of the man. That is not true. It was not true when it was written. It wasn't true when it was published. It wasn't true all the way back to Genesis. And so we were very privileged to be able to straighten out that mess for you. So the advantage of this, we're waiting to see. We've certainly had a great advantage from this in our lives. And so far, what we've done is to establish what we're doing in this conference. And then we've been able to take you through this very first part of from the creation to the flood. Daniel, is there anything in that? Is there anything you want to say about where we are in this? And even, gosh, what has it been like for you to go through this? And have you gone through this? You sitting there thinking I'm off my rocker?
Huh?
He's not guilty.
Well, this has been really fruitful for me because I have to. It hasn't been something that I've previously looked at before. I was mentioning to you earlier, I was thinking about a friend of mine. His name was Scott, and he was a member of our church. And before he was a member of our church, I had put together a group of people that were going to go visit a creation scientist who was visiting a local university by the name of Kent Hovind. Now, Kent Hovind, I won't promote his work very much, but he's one of the workers in the Creation Museum. But anyways, I brought Scott to the seminar, and this was his saving grace, if you will.
How about that?
It was what brought him from being agnostic or atheist into believing in God and seeing that there was a God, that the world was made by a creator. And as you said in the last session, that creator became our savior.
Yeah.
And that was the very thing. And man, he got so excited about this. He took Kent Hovind's DVDs and he burned copies of them and he handed them out like tracts. I mean, everyone that he could come in contact
Isn't that
with.
amazing?
And, I think that gets down to the fact of why are we doing this? Why are we going through this process? Well, it's been fruitful for me as number one to go in to see how this is all played out and how it all came into the plan of God. It's encouraging to see scientists, both Christian and secular scientists, coming to these understandings as well. And I want to ask you a question, Michael. Why do you think it's so important that we show the proof of creation? And in that, what does evolution do to the gospel? If evolution is true, what does that do to the gospel?
Well, that really is the crux of the matter, isn't it? And that's what we're hoping. I have delayed this as making it a forefront topic of this ministry and the gospel revolution. We had so much work to do in just understanding the work of the cross. The odd thing was, the more I understood about the work of the cross, the more I realized the dependency that the entire work of the cross had on the story of creation. So, and of course, we look at other people's material and we have questions that we really wish that they would answer for us, just in case we may be misunderstanding what they are saying. And maybe they could have something that they could share with us. But at the current time, so far, the ones that we have addressed, and we have other people in the gospel revolution that has addressed others about some of their doctrines that they have. They say they're not doctrines. They don't believe in doctrines, but they have doctrines. But it's just cool to say you don't have any doctrines anymore. But they've also approached, and they don't get answers. They just they get blocked. It's just really amazing. They'll delete an entire thread of thought once they realize that it's going against something that they teach. And we don't do that. We really need to understand. We want to understand. But what I did come to see, Daniel, was that this connection, this seamless connection all the way from, of course, Paul makes the connection about the first Adam and the last Adam. I mean, that's unavoidable. And it's probably one of the strongest points that I have been able to persuade people about the gospel, that if based on the first man, the whole Christian world and religious world believes that that by one man sin entered into the world. Now, some of our mystic friends don't adhere to that or well, really anything about the Hebrew scriptures whatsoever. They've just come up with their own thing. And but the reality of Paul's teaching about the first and the last Adam, that kind of takes you this direction. And so why is there a succinct comparison between Adam, the historical document in Genesis as that he was the first human being that was created on this earth? Why is there a comparison between he and Christ? So that we went into in great detail over the years about that. So if you're going to be teaching Jesus by comparison to Adam, you have to understand Adam. I mean, what does that mean? The full reality that began to dawn on me was that if creation is not true, and I absolutely think that this is an absolute truth, that if creation is not true, then anything that you teach about Jesus Christ at all, I don't care whether you're a Catholic or a Baptist or a Pentecostal or a mystic, if creation is not true, any implications that Jesus was anybody other than just a man, as our mystic friends teach, which they also, I don't know what they believe about creation. I've not really seen anything. They don't seem to really make much statement about it, so I have no clue. Maybe you can find out. But the reality of that connection has caused us to look back. And the more I look back, Daniel, the more I realize that this is imperative. This is not and as I said earlier, the way that I used to deal with this was, whether it was creation or evolution, the story is, and so therefore, let's see if this is only a story. Now we know there's power in the story, but the reason there's power in the story is because the story is true. Mm. And if there is no truth in the story, then there's no need in trying to teach a story about Christ that has any power in it whatsoever. And the second part of your question was, what does evolution do to this? Well, evolution is the process of dismantling the gospel itself completely. And this pretense of dance between evolution and belief, and well, I'm a believer, but I also believe in evolution, and the evolutionists kind of, yes, well, at least we got some of those Christians agreeing with us. But the fact of it is, if you are fully persuaded of evolution, you are an atheist. Mm. You may be spiritual, but your spirituality just gets pulled out of something somewhere, and I won't elaborate on that statement, but it's amazing to hear people who say that they do not embrace the reality of creation, but they're spiritual. Why? It just doesn't seem to make any sense. So evolution is the process, the beginning process of completely undermining the validity of the gospel.
I think another aspect of that too is we are avid believers and I don't like using that word believers, but knowing the validity of the Hebrew scriptures. Yeah. And this understanding of, evolution isn't taught in Genesis, and creation is. And so if this is if creation isn't true, then that shows us that our source of truth, the Hebrew scriptures, mm-hmm. is a faulty source. Yes. And so by going through this, we're also lifting up what we honor and respect here at the Gospel Revolution, and that's the Hebrew scriptures.
Even I made the statement a few weeks ago that God created evolution, and the understanding that we gained, Daniel and I were just looking at some of the verses about exactly what got taken onto the ark, and it was one of every species, not one of every kind of every species. Mm. Because all you need to have a black streaked cat and a Himalayan long-haired cat is just a couple of cats, mm-hmm. and very quickly they can become something else very quickly. And it's the same with each and every species, basic species. The thing that we are not is we are not a part of the, why can't I think of the term? It's not monkeys, it's... I'm totally stuck. Anyway, we are not a part of the apes and that kingdom, that world altogether. We are completely different species than that. And some of you sitting there laughing at me knowing what word I'm trying to say. But Daniel can't think of it either. No. So that's when I get redemption. That's when Daniel can't think either. So primate. Yay, Michael. We are not primates, and that just is not true. There is no place of in the genetics of primate and a human. The actually the I forget what it was, but I mean the DNA chain is really amazing. So when DNA first came out, of course, the thing that evolutionists wanted to do is compare this DNA with primates to humans. It's like, wow, look how close this is. Until the DNA was advanced a great deal more, and they found out that we had just as strong of a genetic similarity to a banana. So what has been evolving about DNA is that it is life itself, and that the proteins and the enzymes and things that interact with that DNA chain is what creates the different forms of life and causes that life to function the way that it does. It is just such an amazing design that it is mind-boggling at the intricacy of the design. There's still no computer, there is nothing on this earth that has ever been created by man that is as intricate as even what the DNA system is of a worm, a roly bug, or any of these things. It really is, life is really quite amazing. So, boy, that's an introduction, right? But that is what we're doing. What we want to do is to give you a snapshot of the big picture. So, Daniel, is there part of this that we've gone through that we need to maybe fill in on where we've been?
Well, as we ended the last session, you were talking about how the atmosphere was different. There was a different atmosphere before the flood and after the flood, and because of this different atmosphere, we even see like the big dinosaurs and all of these different things were able to be sustained in that environment.
Yes.
Why is that?
Well, number one is the atmosphere that we understand was that it never had rained before. The best I can tell, there wasn't rain from creation to the flood. So imagine that, you know. But we understand from Genesis that the earth was watered by this system coming up out of the dew of the earth to water everything. And I thought it was very interesting as of this last couple of years, we've had described what's coming in on California last year and this year as atmospheric rivers, and incredible amounts of water in the sky. And I heard one person who understood these things about the climate and these processes, and he said that it was that the volume of the water in the sky was, I think, 33 times that of the flow of the Mississippi River.
Wow.
And so it's just really hard. We think of water being heavy, right? But water can be in different forms in different places. And because it's in different forms in different places, under different pressures, under different temperatures, therefore you can have water, rivers in the sky. Now, from what we understand from what Genesis said, we didn't have rivers in the sky. We had an ocean in the sky, an ocean that covered the entire earth. The other thing that we about that atmosphere that we did not understand, we have no concept of what this was like, because the transition that happened during the flood was so dynamic on every single level of atmosphere. Goodness gracious, they got to see the rainbow. Well, why was there a rainbow the very first time? Think of this. Why was there a rainbow the very first time? Well, God created that day. No, well, we understand the issue of the rainbow and how that happens, but that happens by sun shining through rain falling. It was the first rainbow. So we see the affirmation, and people say, oh, well, this is just made up story. Well, somebody made up a story that is so intricate in detail to delay a rainbow until after the flood was over with. Mm-hmm. Come on, and the earlier parts of Genesis telling us about an environment that would not have been conducive to a rainbow even being able to be seen. And now we have an environment as they stepped off of the ark and they saw this for the very first time. They would have seen for the very first time, because it wouldn't have made any difference whether it was before the flood or after the flood. If sun was shining through water droplets, it would have created a rainbow. Mm-hmm. The obvious answer is that sun had never shone through rain droplets before. So it feels a little weird talking about things like this because we're telling you about a world that doesn't exist anymore. Mm-hmm. But the evidence that some other world did. Now, this whole issue of water is vitally important. We have access and understand the different states that water can be in, from ice to vapor or liquid. We know that water can be in different states. We know that water can be in a state to where that 33 times the volume of the Mississippi River can be in the sky. In today's climate, 33 times the volume of the Mississippi River can be in the sky. It is really quite amazing. And the other thing that I learned several years ago, and then it just went away off of the internet. I'm very glad to let you know that finally, I think that there was just people that took all of this stuff down. They didn't want anybody to know it. But I had learned a decade ago about ringwoodite. And the Northwest University had determined that just under the mantle, the top crust of the earth, between there and the mantle, am I saying that right? Mm-hmm. All right. So we went through this just a little while ago to make sure we kind of had this correct. But they discovered in what's called the transition zone, which is in the upper, like if you took the whole earth and, here's the core way down here. But this part of just below the mantle would circle. It would not be much smaller than the entire circumference of the earth, because it's that close to the surface, relatively speaking. And 300 miles actually is what it is below the Earth's surface. And but they found that is water. It's another form of water, but in that they have found that at least the same amount, if not that, and times doubled that in some approximations, that much water is in just under the crust of the earth. And so then we have that statement in Genesis about how the fountains of the deep broke up. And this layer of earth, which we've told you before, we found that Genesis and also Isaiah, some of the others, we'll dig those up for you again, describe how that God created the earth in layers. And that was not known until the 1700s. Something that was recorded in Genesis was not known until the 1700s. But this particular ringwoodite is what it's called, but it is a hydration-dehydration area. And this area of what can only be described as some form of rock under high pressure and 2,000 degrees. And the thing that we have to understand is that pressure and heat distort the reality of time. It causes time. It's just like a pressure cooker. I don't know of anything more simple to say it. I remember going to my aunt's house, and my mom would cook things on the stove and bubble, bubble, boil, boil, bubble, bubble, boil, boil. And it took a certain amount of time. We went to my aunt's house, and she always threw it in a pot that had a lid that went on it. And she would turn that thing on, and in just a couple of minutes or so, it would start whistling and steam coming out the top under pressure, and it was cooked in like a quarter of the time. Mm. So that little pressure cooker thing when I was a kid gave me this concept and understanding that pressure and heat under pressure causes this things about time to change how we understand what has taken place. Diamonds and rubies and all of these things, and they say that these things took millions of years, but they don't even know that the areas where rubies and diamonds come up from the intense pressure and exactly what those elements are. They know what is all a part of a ruby or a diamond or any other element. But the thing that you don't know is how much pressure it was under and how much heat was applied, and to know exactly how long that it took to form these things. These are assumptions that are there to promote a certain way of thinking. So the other thing, Daniel, that we realize that Genesis lays out for us is this transition of the way the land masses were. So where are we now in our Genesis story?
Yeah, so the waters of the deep coming forth. I mean, I think that's a big explanation of where did all this water come from for the flood. Not only from the deep, but also from the heavens that were opened as well in a place that's never rained before. Yeah. And you can imagine the changes that would take place. I kind of think of the whole earth as almost like a greenhouse effect, in that there's this layer of water that's, causing this whole thing for growth and different things like that. But then we see that after the flood, that changes things a little bit. But also in that video that we have here in our playlist is
please listen to it.
Yeah, is Genesis history. They talk about this expedited ecosystem that came out, and that's why we see this rapid advancement within species. And you have when you have one species that went onto the ark, but now today we've got so many more.
Right. Hundreds and hundreds from that one species that went on the ark. So the elements of this, and the scientists have said for some time that they believe that all of the continents around the earth, that we used to have what they call a Pangea. And the term Pangea just simply means that all the land mass was one mass on the earth. And they show you where, like, if you get in and if you squeeze together, the northern part of Africa, and you squeeze down, Southwest Asia, you can see where that boot of Italy would fit right down in there, and many, many, many other pictures like that. I know that you've looked at it and been able to see, wow, it looks like if you just move this down, it's like a puzzle that would fit together if these were moved. And of course, not to exact dimensions, but to see any familiarity of the shapes of the indentions left where the protrusions are on the other side. I think it's pretty telling. I can't tell you what that all means, but you can see that yourself. So the Pangea would have been something that broke up. Now, remember, when people talk about the Pangea, they don't believe in the Genesis account at all. They don't think that this account of the breakup of the land masses is in the Bible at all. They think that this was their idea. And, excuse me. So the breakup of this landmass not only was the earth shifting and all of its mass of earth, but the water that had to go up over the mountains that we now know, those mountains weren't that high. There was no such thing as a mountain that high before the flood. It is explained in Genesis to us how that the land masses began to move. And then as they moved and the water began to retreat, the water didn't just retreat. It wasn't this quiet thing. But when you've got water that is now on the earth that has never been, and it has covered the highest points of the earth at that time, and suddenly you've got land masses rising up, as you can see that these land masses could not have been taken millions of years. You can see the cuts and the designs in them, and these folks on this video really explain this very well. But then you've got water rushing and at speeds and torrents that are so great that the sediments that had been laid down, so there was a rapid sedimentation and then a rapid erosion. So when you look at the Grand Canyon, what you're looking at is not millions of years. You're looking at, it's obvious that was rapid sedimentation. Mm-hmm. And then it was not millions of years of erosion, because there's no way that erosion would have taken place. Why there? Why not the Mississippi River? Why not, the Amazon and other places like that? Why this? Because this is one place where rapid sedimentation and rapid erosion, if you've got the Rocky Mountains coming up out of the water, you're going to have an unbelievable amount of water cutting through toward the west, going toward the ocean, over lands of recent, very, very recent sedimentations, one right on top of the other, and now the erosion of those sedimentations. I know we're sounding like we know what we're talking about. We just know what others talk about. I don't know nothing. But if the average person can go around talking about evolution, why can't you and I and Daniel talk about creation? And because we know people who do know what they're talking about. Mm-hmm. And these are people that are, you can't laugh at. I know, I've watched the shows and things on TV where people just ha. And let me tell you, the thing that has discredited creation the most is the idiocy of Christianity. I don't like to hear a Christian tell about creation, because it gets into what they believe, and you just got to believe that the God did this, and then God did that, and God did this, and folks, it's just they don't argue from a scientific point, even though creation is very much science-based. It is science itself. And the very physics of the things, the way things are today, is because of the progression of this. Why is this important to the gospel revolution? Because we're looking for something that's going to lead to, and they shall study war no more. But if we don't have our identity, and let me tell you, if you think that you evolved from some primate or a primal ooze or whatever that it was that someone might say, there's no way that you can carry the type of identity and understand the type of identity that you have in evolution that you have when you understand creation. And that you were the very heart of creation itself, to the point that now the Creator now lives in you.
Wow.
Big difference.
That's good preaching.
Is it? I'm just having fun.
I think we should take the offering now.
Yeah, exactly.
So I wonder if we could switch gears here a little bit and talk about the ark. Mm-hmm. So we have this ark, and we have this instruction by God to make this ark. And let me just give you a couple of the specifics here. And God said to Noah, "The end of all flesh has come before me, for the earth is filled with violence through them. Behold, I will destroy them with the earth. So make yourself an ark of gopher wood, make rooms in the ark, and cover it inside and out with pitch.
Yeah.
And we had looked at this word pitch, and you had kind of teased that as we were opening up. And this pitch in the Strong's Concordance, and if you look up that word, it has two parts to it. It has, and I'm not sure I'm saying this right, it has bitumen and a henna plant. And the bitumen was the waterproofing. It was something, it was like a tar that was placed on it.
And we found out that actually those tar pits are in that area of the world.
Yeah, right by the Dead Sea. Near the Dead Sea is where these tar pits are. And the second part of that is the henna plant. And that henna plant is what you had mentioned earlier, and it's something that's used as a dye to give it this red brownish color.
It's just amazing.
Now, why in the world would God tell him to do that? He wanted to look pretty or what?
Yeah, he likes red.
So even in the very creation of this ark, we see the gospel story being told. And what went into that ark? You see the preservation not just of the species, but you see a very specific family is chosen.
Yes.
And why was this family chosen? We alluded to that in the last session that we did. It's because Noah was perfect in all of his genealogies. In other words, his genes were not tainted by whatever was happening on the earth, but his genealogy went straight back to Adam. And that's the beautiful thing about this document that we have called the Hebrew Scriptures, is it documented that genealogy right to Noah and showed us why it was important for this family to come in because of all the other stuff that was going on.
Yeah, and again, for us to try to even conceive what this planet was like under a cursed earth. You see, the one thing that we have never experienced as human beings born even as long ago as 1952. We've never known, even though we were taught, we've never known sin. We've never known unrighteousness. We have never known separation from God. We have never known the world where God performed outside of man. Even though Christianity and religion tries to teach us that, we finally ask the question, show us the proof, but nobody can, nobody has, and nobody will. But we've never lived on an earth that is cursed. I mean, drive through Illinois in the summer when the corn is 15 feet high. You're not going to see a cursed earth there for sure. But we don't understand really what the cursed earth was. But we've never been on a cursed earth. Isn't that amazing? We have never been on a cursed earth. We have never lived as cursed people. Now, I'm just going to get happy here. I'm not going to be able to contain myself. But I want you to repeat that to yourself. I have never lived on a cursed earth, and I have never been a cursed person. I've never been in those shoes. I don't have any of the genetics of Adam in me. Wow. God himself replaced those genetics with himself. So the power of this is immeasurable, and yes, I think we're only still in our infancy of our ability to create, our ability to do, our ability to live, and our ability to have some sense enough to live in peace with each other. Now, can I possibly tell you how to get there? I can't, but I can tell you the elements that exist that promote that. It's called the gospel of peace and the gospel of grace. This is not a gospel I came up with. This is a gospel that was taught by Paul. It was taught also by Apollos. It was foretold by Jesus. It was prophesied by all of the prophets. And Isaiah went into detail about this new gospel of peace and the covenant of peace that was about to come, that others just seem to, they don't want to even look at that, nor do they want to answer our questions about how do you explain this. What they do is go in and take one verse out of context, and that says, for we saw him as stricken and smitten of God. And it says, oh, see there, that was us. We're the ones that said he was stricken and smitten of God. But the fact is, if you read this a little bit more, it's saying that people thought he was stricken and smitten of God for his own transgressions, because the next line says, but he was wounded for our transgressions. So it doesn't say that he was not stricken and smitten by God. What it says is he was not stricken and smitten by God for his own transgressions. He was stricken and smitten by God for our transgressions. But to be that intellectually dishonest, to follow a confirmation bias, is shocking. Now, what they have to do then is remove all of about 3 chapters there together that they refuse to respond to, so that they can rely on this one verse to try to dismantle the entire concept of a gospel of peace, because they don't think God was ever angry before.
Wow.
The process of arriving at a gospel of this magnitude has to have all of the validation that it can possibly have. And I am here, and Daniel is here to tell you that creation is the validation that the world needs to understand the work of the cross. Now, let me give you some very good news. What has previously been called science is being proven wrong on almost a daily basis now. And we've pointed out some of the things that they just refuse to acknowledge, that as they've been challenged with these things now through DNA, leading to all of these magnificent understandings about creation, and that DNA does not give any credence to evolution whatsoever. Nothing.
So here we have in the first session of today that we went through, is we looked at creation up to the flood. And today we looked a little bit at that flood and the difference between the two. From that point on, so the flood happened about 1630 years or so into creation. Yeah. So, and we know that the cross happened about 4,000 years. So what happened from that time is, you see a lot of the stuff that we have spent, as Michael has spent decades. I haven't been around for decades. So. Michael has spent decades of talking about, and that are the characters like Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Moses, David.
What do you mean talk about them? We grew up together.
And you see the law and the priesthood and all of that. But all of that was still a part of this plan, this predestined plan that was before the foundation of the world. And all of it, as we have another 1,000 years of history here that's leading up to Christ. And so you have Abraham and the promise that was given. Michael, that came 290 years after the flood. And then Moses comes up on the scene, and Moses is another 430 years after that promise. Yeah. And and then out of what Moses brought, we have the priesthood is established. We have the kings are established. That's all stemming out of that. And of course, out of that priesthood, then we see this temple worship. And that's where King David comes on the scene. Yes. Now, King David is quite the character because of some of the recent understanding that we had in going through the Revelation, is that it was by understanding David that we finally understood the 1,000-year reign. Because from David to Christ was a 1,000-year period.
Yeah. And therefore we got the last 1,000 years. Now we want to understand more about that 1,000-year period of the reign of Christ, where that he was sitting at the right hand of the throne of God, waiting for his enemies to be made his footstool. You see, that verse about Jesus waiting at the right hand of the throne of God while his enemies are made his footstool was not after the resurrection, but instead from when David took the throne until the cross. And then at the cross, his enemies were made his footstool, which is made very clear, but gets distorted because of a lack of our understanding as to where that 1,000-year reign actually existed. Now, we admit we know very little about that 1,000-year reign, but we do know where it was and where it took place. Jesus was called David. I mean, this is all just accurate information that we have. So what Daniel has explained to you here is not just the things that happened in every individual life in this, but this is a genealogy. Remember that one of the Gospels takes all the way from Adam and lists everybody in the genealogy from Adam all the way to Christ. The other one starts at Abraham and goes all the way to Christ, because one is needing us to understand one principle about creation and Christ, and the first Adam and Christ. And the next one is needing us to understand the promise that went to Abraham and the promise that was fulfilled in Christ. So these two different genealogies start at two different places for two different reasons, to emphasize these things. So the fact of it is that genealogy is superimposed over the history of the planet itself. And it is not separate from, but part of and parcel to the creation of the heavens and the earth. And we solve that relationship, the genetic relationship between heaven and earth. And isn't it amazing that by the time we get to Jesus and the work of the cross, we have a new heaven and a new earth? Why? Because they had to change together, because they're genetically connected. This is so much fun. So the progression of this timeline is there. It's in everybody's Bible. I mean, there's not somebody's Bible that this does not exist in, but it gets a little overwhelming. What we've attempted to do, and Daniel's next session is going to be, I think, very successful in putting this into its time frame of how this, of where this all took place, and the importance of time in its existence. Because we don't understand time, nor its God himself creating time. God created time. And then you're going to say that 1,000 years is a day and a day is 1,000 years? Come on, you're looking for confirmation bias that you want to fit your doctrine into. God created the 24-hour day. It wasn't man. Us made that up. No, it was not us who made that up. That was God who created the 24-hour day. And as Daniel showed you, and probably will reemphasize again, is that the 24-hour day, that's what the Hebrew means. This is a historical, verifiable day. A day is 24 hours. And remains so all the way up into the cross. Now, it's still 24 hours is still a day, but now it has no relationship to God at all. Well, God's timing is perfect. God's timing is over. The Lord's gonna. No, he's not gonna. He did. You see, anything that you have a doctrine that's based in the concept of some future point in time, date in time, is a lie. Because in the economy of God's time, time has ended, even as we were told about in Revelation, and the fulfillment of all time. That all the fulfillment of all things and time itself, and the end of time, and those terms, the end of the world. But we had to find out what world and what time was measuring as to what world was going to end. So if you are in any doctrine that's waiting, and if you're looking at Israel saying, "Oh, this is that which," forget it. This is not that. This is just a war, and that's all it is. And but see, we don't need to be feeding into these things that God is somehow involved in all of this stuff, because he just simply is not.
Stop preaching my message.
Oh, that's what you're saying. I can't help it. I don't know what you're going to say. I've heard little bits of it. That's how good Daniel is at sharing. He shares a little bit, and it's like,
well, I hope you're enjoying the conference this far. Again, make sure you check below the video. We got a couple more sessions coming your way. Don't forget to check out the history of Genesis that we've included in the playlist. Also, we're adding one more about the waters of the deep. And that is the secret ocean, 300 miles below the earth. And that'll be included for your enjoyment as well.
Boy, I tell you, and this one now, whereas the other one these are Christians doing that one. This one has nothing to do with Christianity. This is the University of Northwest University in just northwest of Chicago, and also the University of New Mexico, and a seismologist and a rock doctor. I don't know what they call him.
A rock doctor.
So, but they've done extensive work, and this work in determining about this ringwoodite has been duplicated in a lab. This is proof that that community, who are still saying that water came here on comets and asteroids, they're still saying that to this day. I just listened to one just this past week, and they say it with very well, we know that's where this, and they've never found water out there anywhere. But these guys, having no biblical implications whatsoever, have determined that all the water on the earth came from within the earth, from its origins.
Wow. So make sure you check them out. We'll see you back tonight. For our Calgary, Alberta friends, I want to check out this buffet that Don always was talking about.
Oh, dear Lord, don't remind me. That was really wonderful. But boy, you didn't want to sit at Don's table, because it was like watching a bear go to work. Jesus.
All right. Well, thanks for tuning in. Again, we'll see you next session.
Bye-bye.
This is 2024. Everything is expensive. I know. I'm raising 2 little girls, and I tell you what, everywhere I turn, every time I set my foot outside the door, I'm spending money. And here I have the audacity to come on here and ask you for money. Well, that's exactly true. The gospel is completely free. The message is completely free. All of the content that we provide here at the Gospel Revolution is completely free. However, on our end, it doesn't come without a cost. It costs us to produce the material that we do. Would you help us? I know things are expensive, but maybe you have a couple extra dollars you can help us out with. Maybe you have a lot of extra dollars you can help us out with. Can you do that? Can you reach in your pocket? Can you help us? Can you go to the website below right now, gospelrevolution.com or graceconferences.ca if you're in Canada? Can you reach in your pocket and help us out? Give us a few dollars that we can get this gospel message to as many people as we can, and we can keep it free for as long as we can. That's our goal. We never intend to charge for anything that we produce. The only thing that you can buy at the Gospel Revolution is the paperback version of our books, but we'll give them to you for free anyways if you can't afford it. So reach out to us, find out how you can help. You might say, I can't help financially, but I really, really want to help. Share our videos, share the content, share them on Facebook, share them on YouTube, share them on Instagram, whatever platform you're listening, Spotify, whatever it is, share the content. That is a great way to help us. Email it to your friends. We appreciate anything that you can do to help. We're here for you. We want to save the world, and we want the world to know the good news.